Our next writer, Donald J. Bingle, has written 3 novels, more than 40 pieces of short fiction, including tonight's story, which appeared in Time Traveled Tales. He's a member of many writing organizations, including the Horror Writers Association, and once received a surprise award in the mail for his contributions to time travel. His latest novel, Net Impact, is not only available in print or ebook from the usual sources, but also as an audiobook from audible.com. Visit his website, www.donaldjbingle.com. Come on up, Don.
For every time season. The first sign was the tall grass receding into the soil. A few weeks later, the grass was entirely gone, and a rich layer of loose loam lay upon the earth. But then the water welled up from the forest floor and froze, gray and dirty, covering the birthing ground all winter. As the season progressed, the snow grew incrementally cleaner and fluffier, until one day, unencumbered by dirt, it floated heavenward to form gray clouds. The dark clouds, in turn, warmed in the sky above their charcoal shadows and became puffy and white and fled to the western skies, leaving only blue heavens and bright light streaming from the earth to the sun above. As the snows departed and the season of float arrived, he saw a telltale greasy residue had burgeoned forth from the ground beneath the protective cap of slush and snow, making clear that the process of creation was underway. As always, the myriad creatures that combined and conspired to cause creation waddled and slithered and whispered in, fat and bloated, regurgitating up their individual contributions to the collective cause, each adding just a tiny bit. And the greasy spot of earth grew damper and darker and larger, and the worms and the blowflies and the maggots intertwined in the muck of life to give it form and substance and structure, building the basic components bit by bit. They called it the miracle of life, but he knew better. He was no mystic, no fanatic, no believer in unproven religions. He was a man of intelligence and science and understanding and logic. And being all of those things, he knew the truth. He understood the process, chemical, of course, the creatures each picking up from the earth nuggets of the nutrients and chemicals and components best suited to their task. Then their bodily systems combined those nutrients into higher and higher molecular forms, proteins and sugars and amino acids, even crystallizing bits of salt and calcium structure. Scientists did not yet understand completely how the various creatures knew how and when and where to combine their contributions toward creation, a gap of understanding that gave the religious and the irrational grounds for their outlandish convictions. But cooperate they did. The harder components comprising the infrastructure were the first completed for the most part. Then layer after layer of softer tissue was added until the form began to take shape, began to change from a festering pile of ooze and squishy bits into a cohesive mass of muscle and organ, eventually covered by skin and infused with blood. The progress was slow but sure. He saw the body. It was well enough along now to call it that. Each day as he walked past, toe and heel. At first, he barely glimpsed it with his peripheral vision as he looked straight back upon his path. As he passed, though, he turned to gaze upon it with attention until far enough away that he could straighten his view and look upon it from a distance in its setting. As time passed, he became more and more obsessed with this particular construct, a female of about his age. And over time, he became emotionally attached to the composing body, visiting the birthing ground each day, watching the progress, watching the hideous spot of grease turn to bone and flesh, then into a fully formed woman, naked and pale. His feelings for her formed and firmed, even as she did, growing from interest to fondness to love. He obsessed about her, became possessive of her, even before. No one else came this way. No one else took this path through the dark woods, which each float season captured millions upon millions of the simple leaves. Ascending from the simple leaves, the ground gave forth each winter beneath the snow. As float progressed to summer, the trees would string up the ensnared leaves and infuse them with moisture and color, plumping them as they moved from scraggly brown to vibrant red, then orange, then yellow, then green. Then, when the cooling of wet arrived, and the water abandoned its salts and fled from the seas to the rivers and streams and creeks to fly up from the land into the sky, the trees would swallow up the leaves, a last nourishment before the bleak, harsh winter. But now in summer, the forest was thick and tangled and nigh impassable to the casual wanderer. Only he knew the easy way through the concealing foliage. No one else knew, he was certain, that she was birthing. She was for him alone. And finally, one bright day, as the sun sauntered toward the distant hills in the east, he saw that she was almost complete. The blood of the earth flowed forth into a long gash across her neck and into a dozen other smaller, deeper gashes across her midsection in a rush of creation. Her color warmed from white to pink as the heat of birth gathered in her bosom. He knelt over her and felt her chest and was fortunate enough to feel the first beat of her heart and the gentle sway of the first breath of life flowing past his cheek as it entered her pinking lips. He hugged her as she came to life, cradling her in his arms, trembling in excitement and exhilaration. She was meant to be his, he knew it. Only the morning before, he had found in the woods the glinting silver sealing tool that would be perfect to close up the gashes in her neck and abdomen once the earth's lifeblood had finished infusing her with life. It was a near thing, though, and he had to jerk from her in a heated frenzy of life-giving passion to seal them all up in quick succession, an ecstatic sensation, the flush of activity giving him a rush of excitement. She struggled with him as he completed his task. That often happened with the newly birthed. Their faculties were scrambled in the first few moments, but he grasped her tightly. He had to maintain his grip on her all the way back to his house, clamping his hand hard upon her mouth during the walk through the now deeply dark woods. He took her straight away to the basement beneath his remote homestead, binding her with restraints to prevent her from fleeing recklessly into the cruel world, away from his love and protection. No one must know of her birth, of her life, until she was ready, until he was ready. He savored what was to come, the days and nights of bringing her fully to life and health, the looking back at their moments together as the future spread out behind them, always out of sight, always unknown and unseen until it happened. At first she might fear him, might struggle against him, might seek out others to undo her complicated thoughts and gruesome fears and bring her to the simple understanding of life. But the day would come when she would no longer cringe during his touch. One day she would come to trust and love him. And when that happened, he would release her to the big, wide world. If you love someone, they said, you must set them free. And he would, because he loved as no other. Oh, he would watch her from afar, constantly, almost compulsively at first. But over time, the compulsion would fade. It always did. As he cared less, he would watch her less and less. He would take his journals of their life together, listings of her habits and likes, and subject them to the nib on his eraser, sucking the ink from the willing paper until they vanished from the record. Eventually, he would begin to forget her, recognizing her only sporadically, until that fateful day when he would see her and feel her memory flee in a spark of forgetting from his mind. And when that happened, he would go once again deep into the woods and find another set of journals buried near the swamp by the big, shrinking willow. The journals would tell him of the next place to look for a greasy spot and another bit of ecstasy in his life. That's what he did each time he forgot his last birth to love, and he longed to repeat the process again and again. He loved to birth. He longed to birth. He lived to birth. And no one would ever stop him from birthing again. He never understood institutional birthing, digging up a box from a labeled spot in the ground with a crowd of others, then bundling it into a hearse to a parlor where the chemicals in it were replaced with blood, then sending it to a hospital for sparking to life, most often followed by days, if not months, of tubes and machines until the body was fully functional. What kind of birth was that? Tragic and depressing, at least until the process was complete. He preferred a quick birth. That's what he'd had. A burst of electricity spreading out from his body into a metal chair with a blissfully short confinement afterward. But of course, he was no fool. He was a scientist, a man of intelligence and understanding. He understood the way of the world. He couldn't birth indefinitely. Time only flows in one direction. Already he felt the change beginning. His passion was slipping away as his body shrunk in size. He only probably had time for 2, maybe 3 more births. In but a few short years, he would be too small to birth anything but dogs and cats. By then, the state and its beneficence would force him into a retirement facility where his lifetime of knowledge would be extracted, his mind would grow feeble and dim, and he would grow tiny and stupid and completely dependent. It frightened him, the loss of the power of birthing. He would not give it up, not until he had to, even if he was reduced to using a transmogrifying glass to soak up a pinpoint of the light of the earth, to birth small ants in a burst of flame and flurry of smoke. He knew the statistics. Many serial birthers ended up that way. Some saw it as sad, even pathetic, but they didn't understand the rush of birthing with your own hand. Besides, the ants and bugs and worms of the world, they had the real power of birthing, to bring more of such miraculous, noble creatures into the world with a flash of light. That was sublime. That was birthing a true birther. That was the power of creation. He wasn't a religious man, but he had to admit that flash of light made him feel like a god. There was the next spot. The tall grass was shorter there today, shrinking faster than the blades nearby. In a few months, there would be another greasy spot in the dirt. He felt his excitement grow with the realization that once again the power of life flowed in his hands alone. It was a simple matter of effect and cause. He would commit birth here in just a few months at the change of the seasons. He knew it as sure as the sun set in the east. It was only a matter of time. Thank you.